You're listening to This Week in E-Commerce, the Ecom Nation podcast. Dive into the top online retail headlines with your hosts, Paul Waddy and Mal Chia. Let's load up the cart. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 28. I am Mal Chia, and back with me is Paul Waddy. Paul, how are you?
Good morning, Mal. Morning, everybody. I'm good. Well rested. We're doing this on a Monday, so well rested, and looking forward to seeing what this week holds. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm doing good. It's Adelaide Fringe time here in Adelaide, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So been out a little bit with the family to see some Fringe shows, but I went to see Dune 2 on the weekend. Which, I got to say, this is a masterpiece. This is like The Godfather Part 2, Empire Strikes Back,
Really?
All rolled into one. I think it's the greatest sequel ever, and arguably, possibly one of the greatest movies ever. It is so good.
Would you think less of me if I said I have no idea what Dune is?
A little bit.
I'm Googling it. Okay.
Wow, you had no idea what Dune is. So it was a movie back in the 80s. The novels came out in like the 40s or 50s, something like that. And then David Lynch made a film of it in 1980 something or so. So giant sandworms in a desert planet where they mine it for spice.
Cool.
Yeah. Check it out next time you have 3 hours to spare.
I'll do that in about 12 years from now.
When the kids are out of the house.
Yeah.
Well worth watching. All right. Well, anyone who's listening to this and enjoys science fiction or just enjoys epic movies, Dune 2 is phenomenal. So I'm already making plans to go see it again in IMAX next time.
Wow. Okay. So that's a glowing review.
Yeah, definitely worth your time. But on the retail side, we're going to kick straight into it. So it's good to have you back, Paul, after a week. It's always funny doing the episode by myself.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm talking to myself.
Yeah.
All right. We're just going to shout out some good news to start off with. Erica Berchtold, she formerly of The Iconic. Late last week, it was announced that she will be joining, not Best and Less, as we first thought, but she's joining Mosaic Group, which look, I'm not surprised, but also at the same time, I am surprised.
Good get for them, for Mosaic Brands. Erica, I think, is fantastic. And I think she got a fair job ahead of her, but I think this is a real coup for those guys. I think Erica's fantastic and one of the best retail leaders in the country for sure. So that's pretty big news.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what happens with Mosaic. Obviously, they've got a huge stable of brands. And regardless of what you think of the different brands, they do have a very significant both retail, physical and growing online presence as well. I wish her and the team the best of luck. Really excited to see what they can do there.
And just reading the article, big shout out to their current team, which says during the first half, Mosaic's net profit surged 121%, 5.4 million, despite revenue decreasing by 12%. So I say congrats, because again, that's what it's all about. 121% revenue, net profit growth while dropping your revenue is something we talk about a lot. And for those listening, again, it's not about how much you spend, it's about how much you bank. So obviously, efficiency is on their mind there, which is good news for us because it's what we're always talking about.
As a wise man once said, revenue for vanity, profit for sanity.
Yeah, that's right. that's very wise.
That is. All right, and other news. January retail spending was down. So the ABS released their report, just showing that the data showing that while overall sales increased 1.1%, a lot of that was kind of due to the fact that there was an increase in the cost of food, which was primarily driving that. So primarily cafes, restaurants, takeaway sales, and food sales driving that growth, while generally other spending actually went down. So in particular, things like clothing, footwear, accessories fell 2%, 1.7%, household goods declined 1.4%, and department stores recording 1.3% declines as well. So yes, food is growing. It's one of those things where it's like, you're seeing some good stuff, but the good stuff's actually happening. It's kind of masking it. So the measure is almost wrong at the moment, how we're measuring some of these things.
Yeah, I agree. I remember looking into some of this stuff. I can't remember what for, but in Ibis World, and the way that it lumps retail, food and cafes and so on into retail is it's firstly it's completely different. Like it's different needs, And yeah, I agree. On face value, you think, oh, great, spending's up 1%. And then you look at like clothing, footwear, and accessories, which is a huge part of e-commerce, which is down 1.7, which is actually quite significant. And household goods not far behind at 1.4, which is what we kind of predicted, I think, that December was tough, January was tougher, still, realistically. And I'd really like to see food split out from this. I just feel there's different kettle of fish. And I don't think we're surprised. I kind of feel like people listening to this would have, probably felt that as well. I think it was a pretty tough January.
Yeah, I think it'd be rare to find someone who actually would have done very well through Jan. I think most people were either experiencing some level of decline or flat at the best. And even a lot of conversations, people are generally aiming for a flat year, depending obviously on which stage of your life cycle you're in. But more mature businesses, definitely aiming for more flat sales, but really focusing on that efficiency piece, like you talked about before with Mosaic. So it's great to see some brands doing it. But you're 100% right, though, that when you consider things like food costs are going up. You go to the grocery store, like everything is getting more expensive. It's getting more expensive and it's getting smaller as well. You've got shrinkflation happening there. And that does mask the issue.
It does. And it kind of like makes me feel worried because the whole point of, deflation is to get those core products down. And admittedly, I don't really do the shopping, but, I'm not seeing it. And when I saw a lot of cafes put their prices up. It's the exact opposite of what's intended. So, I guess the proof will be in the pudding when consumer price index is next measured. But it doesn't feel like stuff's getting cheaper. I guess being an optimist, I would like to think that if food spending in cafes and so on is going up, maybe retail, maybe that's a good sign, a little bit of a sign that people are feeling interest rates held. Maybe people are starting to relax a little bit, and maybe the rest of retail will follow soon. That's the optimistic outlook that I would take.
I definitely think most of the spending is still in more of those experiences. People still, yes, going out to restaurants and things like that, but also holidays as well. Like travel is still booming. Travel is still huge. You go to the airport anytime, it's absolutely chock-a-block full of people, going on interstate flights, holidays or overseas holidays, things like that. So all of that's heating up. People are definitely spending more on that, but it's more those discretionary items, which I don't think that confidence to spend on those isn't there yet, and I don't think is going to be there for a little while.
Yep. So exactly right. So in summary, 1.7% doesn't seem like a lot, but it's millions and millions and millions of dollars less being spent on categories that probably lots of us here and on listening to this are probably trying to sell. So there's just less money out there, and I think we're feeling that for sure. January and probably February.
Okay. And on the next story, we're going to be looking at liquor stores. So again, some further reports showing that visitation to liquor stores has actually increased over the last 12 months. So we're seeing a big increase there. And Paul, you and I are no strangers to the alcohol industry, both as as consumers and as people who've worked on the
let's say we also are on the sales side as well. Yeah. So it's not just consumption.
Yeah, but it's showing that a lot of the gains, which were pretty much the gains over the last couple of years through COVID, especially. Obviously, you saw an acceleration everywhere. Everyone moving into subscription wine boxes and what have you. A lot of this has been erased, and while they're seeing the visitation in store continuing to be high, that actually hasn't translated through to sales. So people are still visiting liquor stores, but spending less. And this is showing across all the brands like the Endeavour Group, Dan's, Woolies, etc. So all those brands really starting to see a decline there. So, Paul, what's your take on this?
My first take is Queenslanders were the most frequent liquor shoppers, averaging 16 trips in the 12-month period, which is super impressive for an average. There's a lot of trips there for. I think this probably sums up the whole situation, right? Like translating this to online, online retail. It's kind of like we're still getting the sessions quite often. Maybe maybe the add to carts, but not the conversions, or maybe not the add to carts, just having a bit of a browse. And I think it's like the desire is still there to go and do these things, to go and purchase. But people are just, cutting, being more discretionary about their purchase. And reading between the lines, people are going as much as they ever have, if not, more, by 3.5% more trips. but just spending less, which means they're either buying less or opting for the cheaper brands. That's no surprise at all, because this is what we're always talking about. Is that we're feeling the same thing in e-commerce, which is like people want to do it, but they just have less money to do it with. So, when you're up against stiff competition, and it's super stiff competition in alcohol, you've got to have like a reason that people want to buy from you. And this data is just a really like strong reminder for people listening that own brands or work in brands or run paid media accounts that the spending is down. Like, people want to see more. And if you want to maintain your levels of profitability, like we saw Mosaic Brands actually lift while sales came down, this really sums up that whole point. And I guess I'm speaking a little bit to paid media here. It's like the answer is not to spend more to try and get sales. The answer is just to be more efficient and potentially even spend less and eliminate wastage from your paid media. And I'm only picking on paid media because we own a marketing agency, Ecom Nation. I'm also only picking on paid media because it does tend to be, with the exception of stock, it does tend to be your next biggest expense. So it's just a really stark reminder to people that it is a different kettle of fish out there. You really just can't spend as frivolously as you did 1 to 2 years ago. And even us as, owning that agency, I don't think we would go into most brands and be like, so what you got to do is spend more to get the sales. But I'm only linking it back to that because we are seeing a lot of brands trying to spend their way out of this problem. And this is disconnecting us from online retail and just kind of allowing us to be a bit kind of, I guess, objective about the situations. Like in the liquor industry, they're feeling exactly that. Spend is down in one of the core categories in Australia. So we're feeling the same. Retail spending is down. I challenge everybody to think about how are they focusing on their profits when the sales are down? And I think the answer is efficiency, Mal.
And it's also just taking a step back as well and really looking at what the business model is as well, I feel. Because I think a lot of people who kind of jumped into it, seeing the growth through COVID, would have probably overcapitalized and overinvested in areas like subscription, things like that. And just thinking that, the gravy train was going to roll on. But as that slowed down and things have started to change, they don't, but particularly in alcohol, you don't have the margins to invest a whole lot in advertising either. So again, it goes back to the fact that you just really need to really think about what your offering is. You can't just do the same thing as everyone else. You really need to show how you differentiate, which is why I look at brands in the alcohol space, like a Good Pair Days, for instance. Good Pair Days do an incredible job because they've got such a unique offering. No one else has that, where they're all about going in there, creating your own unique taste and then having wines paired to what your unique taste is, rather than here's like a generic basket of goods. Similarly with things like Alpha Box and Dice, which Jared Brown, number 5 on top 50 people in e-commerce, really focusing on creating a really great customer experience. So not just product, but actually a really seamless experience as far as someone purchasing from both their sites, Alphabox and Dice, and sometimes Always. So there are ways to do it, but it's just really focusing on the business model, I think. Like you said, not focusing just on like, how do I just spend my way to success, but really taking a step back and looking at how do we actually rethink our business model, what we're going to compete on so that we can actually be competitive and, either maintain or continue to grow through this downturn, which we're all facing.
Good point. Alphabox and Dice, I haven't heard of them, but just check it out while you're talking, and straight away I'm hit with your favorite bubbly now in a can, like bang, straight away, point of difference. Scroll down, there's a pretty compelling loyalty free gift when you join the Plan Wine Club. So they're hitting you really hard with some points of difference, which is pretty cool.
All right, we're going to move on to another story, and I believe our last one for today. Had to split this recording in 2 parts, so I've kind of lost what time we're up to. But we're gonna talk about something which we have not really discussed very much on the podcast, and that is the gender pay gap and gender equality. And this is obviously by the time this comes out, it is International Women's Week, and International Women's Day is coming up on Friday. So I had the pleasure last week of attending the Inside Retail Women's Day 365 breakfast initiative, which was a really great event. And that event was really just highlighting the fact that things like equality and inclusion need to be a year-round thing, not just like a 1 week or a 1 day thing. And this comes off the back of the fact that the Workplace Gender Equality Agency recently revealed the results of a study conducted amongst private companies with employees over 100. And specifically looking at the retail space, we're going to focus in primarily on fashion here, is that in fashion, a large chunk of fashion brands have quite a significant pay gap. And when I say significant, I'm talking about up to like 60% difference between men and women on what the median wage is for men versus women. So highlighting leading the pack, or not leading, as the case may be, is the City Chic Collective. And also in there as well are brands like, Valley Girl, Pandora, who had, over 50% gender pay gap. And then also brands like Seafolly and Lorna Jane, who have pay gaps of 44.5% and 37.1% respectively. Now, Paul, these are quite staggering numbers to think, especially since most of these brands target women. Women are their core customers. Yet you're seeing such massive differences, between what men get paid in these organizations and what women get paid. Now, why do you think that is? What do you think's happening here? That in fashion and retail, we haven't been able to be able to bridge that gap. It's quite stark.
Yeah, I mean, there's no excuses really, because there's some brands here that have done it really well, and great brands. Thrills, 6.1%, so that's going the other way, where the gap is, in favor of women. Signal Brands, which is again big. Guess, Nine West, Steve Madden, and Carla Zampatti. So, I think the first thing is to say, there's just no excuses for it anymore. I guess in the past, what we've seen is probably males dominating executive roles on the higher salaries, and women typically on the floor of retail businesses. And I think it's just it's kind of, as I said before, it doesn't matter why. That's also a problem, by the way, in itself, that males dominate executive roles, because it's my opinion that in e-commerce, I'm talking about e-commerce specifically at the moment, there are better female leaders in ability than male, in my experience, comfortably, I would say. So the fact that that's not being recognized still, or reflected still, in a lot of these ridiculous pay gaps, some of them are 44.5%, 37%, Lorna Jane especially, pretty disappointing, those brands. I think it's just, they've got to fix it, Mal, and it's not really up to us to tell them how to do that, because they just need to follow some brands who have absolutely nailed it, in the ones I mentioned, Thrills and Signal and Carla Zampatti. I've got 3 girls, so I want to make sure that they're afforded the same opportunities in their everything, particularly in their ability to earn money. And I would like to think as well that if women are, having families and so on, that is still not being looked as a deterrent to rehire, to hire, to put in executive positions. The simple line is just work that shit out, just work it out. It's not up to me to tell people how. It's just such a, you can have a phenomenal work-life balance, start a family, and have women in fantastic leadership positions, as we do at Ecom Nation as well. But yeah, I just think it's super disappointing, some of these businesses. What's your take?
And you and I have had the pleasure of working some fantastic female leaders as well, such as, obviously you're at Shopo, Jane Liu there, Carly Brown, a good friend of mine, who spoke at the international, the Inside Retail event last week. And, Angelica Conditsis from Baby Boo. There's so many fantastic female leaders in this space that it's still just it surprises me when I see data like this to show that actually, there is still a very, heavy weighting towards males in executive position in our in our industry, or as Mitch Joel says, pale, male, and stale.
Pale mail. It's like, yeah. I don't know what it is, honestly, Mal. It's not our problem to work out. These people need to work it out. Like, I do find, like, I'm just Googling some of the businesses. I do find private equity is still a little bit skewed, like a bit feels male heavy in the dealings that I've had. And that's probably not fair to say about all, but I'm just saying purely in the experience that I've had, it does still feel a little bit stacked with males, whereas I feel a lot of the innovation and the heart of e-commerce is female led. And so I kind of feel there's maybe a bit of a mix of the old and the new here. And I know we're lumping all of retail in, and traditional old retail does have a lot of males in it. I would love to see this. Like, I would feel like pure play e-commerce would have a lot better balance. But I just think some of these places are still just operating like dinosaurs, and it's got to stop. And credit to Thrills and Colours and Patty and all those ones that have done it, and great brands, great businesses as well.
Well, I think you definitely need to be intentional about it. But I think a lot of people just try to put their head in the sand. And I've worked at places before where they've stuck their heads in the sand and just expected it to work itself out. They would say that, hey, we're inclusive. But then when you look at the data, they're far from inclusive. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things which, we need, as every business needs to actually be intentional in terms of how we do address this problem. Like I say, it's not our job to be able to tell people how to do that. But I think there's definitely some examples to follow. And you pointed out some examples there. But I think with every organization listening, anyone listening today, think about what that looks like within your organization, and think about what processes or systems or just things you have in place in the organization to be able to address this. Whether it is something as hard and fast as having a certain percentage of gender parity in your executive positions or things like that, or whether you're looking at pay scales, whatever it is, right? But I think there's something which everyone can do here to ensure that we do have better representation across gender, ethnicity, sexuality, etc., across organizations. I think we're just healthier and better for it.
Yeah, I think you said it. Just be deliberate about it and start thinking about it and take action. It won't sort itself out.
Fantastic. All right, Paul, that's all we've got time for this week. We were going to talk about the Apple car, but I'm going to park that for next time since I think we don't have time for it.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, right. And we'll see each other in 5 minutes at another meeting.
We will. All right. All right.
Bye,
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a great week.
See you, Mal.